Hello besties, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on this video, and if you're back, thank you so much for your support. November was a really rough month for me. A lot of the books that I read I didn't enjoy as much as I had hoped. I liked one so very little that I ended up selling it, and I said it like that because I didn't want to say, oh, I hated this book, even though I did in fact hate the book. I read a total of 16 books. Some of them I did love and they have become some of my favorites. Other ones I wanted to throw them away or burn them. So buckle up, buttercup. To start things off, I read The Beauty of Darkness. This book I felt like was a perfect way to finish up the trilogy. This is the third book in the Remnant Chronicles series. If I said that funny, it's because I have an accent, and no matter how many times I practice it, I will still say those words wrong. I felt like everything really came to a head, and I was really happy with the conclusion of how the story ended. I can't tell you any more than that because I really don't want to spoil it for you, but if you want to read this book, I would suggest starting with The Morgan. It's a quick little novella, but it really gives you the backstory into this entire series, and that's where I started. That's where I would suggest for you to start as well. I also read Marked by Destiny. So this is a YA romantasy with some of the most vivid world building I have ever read in my life. And I say that because the female lead has to go on an adventurous journey to figure out what her destiny is. And as we travel along with her, it's just very easy to picture the characters, the training grounds that she eventually ends up at, and then everything that goes down from there. It's just very easy to see everything in your head as you're reading it. And with a fantasy book, I just feel like that's the most important part of reading a fantasy book because you need to know what's happening. This book is just a perfect way to start off the series, and I honestly cannot wait to see what Maggie's gonna do with the rest of the series. Love Like Magic is another fantasy book that I read in the month of November. Now I want to say that this is a young adult because it didn't have any spice in it, and I am completely fine with that. The female lead for this book is a witch, and she has to go on a trial to gain her magical abilities. While she's doing that, she ends up failing her trial, so she is giving a second chance, and then in order to do so, she has to find somebody and off them. Let me just say that the female lead goes through a lot in this story, and I felt like her family could have been a little bit more supportive. With that being said, I ended up giving it a perfect rating, and I will be reading book 2. I read The Monstrous Kind, and this was a buddy read with my good friend Brandy. I absolutely hated this book, and I think I gave it a 1 star, if not a 2 star. I'm not sure. I just know it's very, very low. The main issue that I had with this story is that the first half of the book, you get a female lead that is very strong. She doesn't need no man. She knows what she wants in life. She can protect herself. And then the second half, it's like a complete 360 and not in a good way, and then all of a sudden the female lead needs a man. She needs to be saved. She's a damsel in distress, and I was like, what happened to the female lead that we met at the beginning of the book? That part right there just confused me, and then the plot twists that were thrown at the end were not really needed, at least in my opinion. I did not enjoy this book at all. The only reason I made it through it is because I was listening to the audiobook. Then I read Our Sweet Little Secret by QB Tyler, and I want to say these are not in the order that I read them. This is just the pile that I put them on to talk about them. Anyways, moving on. The female lead for this book ends up having a one-night stand at her friend's wedding. She really likes this guy, but he ends up ghosting her, and then little and behold, she meets him a few months later, and it turns out that he is her boss. So then things get complicated. He is also engaged. This book has you questioning your morals because you will be rooting for the main couple, but at the same time you know what they're doing is wrong, so you're like, why am I rooting for this couple? Very mixed feelings. Ended up giving it a 3.5. Aaron's Obsession. This book had no business being so entertaining, but it really was. If you're into primal play, and if you're somebody that's like, what the fuck is primal play, this book is not for you. This book gave chasing after your woman a whole new meaning. The female lead is looking for her father, and while she's trying to find her father, she finds herself in a very tricky situation. In order to be saved from these people that are literally chasing her, the male lead basically takes her under his wing and tells her like, okay, this is what we have to do to make sure that you are unharmed. There's also a murder mystery that takes place in the background of the story because someone does end up being unalived, and you're trying to figure out why was she unalive, and then at the same time you're trying to find the female lead's dad. This had a lot of moving pieces, but I really liked how everything worked together. The whole time you're trying to figure out how every single character is connected because they are connected in one way or another. I also read Lost and Lassoed, and this book was everything and more than I wanted from this couple. I had been waiting for this love story since I read book 1, and this is book 3. I got a nice little package at my front door with a nice little ribbon in it, and it was everything that I wanted in life. I ended up giving this book a perfect rating. The audiobook is phenomenal. I bought the audiobook at 8 a.m. as soon as the book released, and I finished it before 8 p.m. that night. I couldn't stop listening to it. I didn't want to stop listening to it. I felt like the story was just perfect, and I don't want to ruin this for anybody that hasn't read this series, but if you're somebody that loves small town romance with cowboys and enemies to lovers, then this book will be perfect for you. Honestly, this entire series would be perfect for you. I ended up reading Dark Notes by Pam Goodwin, and I had a special edition of this book. I hated it so much after I finished it that I ended up selling it to somebody else because I didn't want to look at it on my shelves. This book just made me really uncomfortable. It is a professor-student forbidden romance, and while I do like to read books with that trope, it needs to be done in like a respectful manner. The female lead for this story was 17 years old for a very long time. She was barely legal, and it was a very spicy book with a man that was like twice her age. It just made me really uncomfortable. I'm not a fan of reading spicy books where the main characters are under 18 years old. I'm just not about it. If they're under 18 years old, it needs to be a YA book. I don't want to read about it. That's literally where I draw the line, and I read some very unhinged books and stories, but I just cannot look past that, and especially for being an age gap. As a 17-year-old, she had no business being with somebody that was in his 30s. I'm pretty sure he was in his 30s. Maybe, I don't think it was his 40s. Was it his 20s? Maybe it was late 20s, early 30s. I did not like anything about it. It was no bueno. We're gonna move on to the next book, which also did not live up to my expectation either, and that was The Syndicator by Runix. Now, I was very unhappy with the story, but I'm not gonna be one of those people that is under the author's comment section and DMs telling her how awful a person she is because of what she did with the story. No, as an author, I feel like she could do whatever she wants to do to make sure that she is pleased with the story that she published, and from everything that I've seen online, she's very happy with how she wrapped up the story. I just felt like I wanted more from the story, and it just didn't deliver. It was also written in a POV of like multiple characters, like all the couples, which is, how many couples? There's 4 different couples, and every couple had their own chapter. Well, every person had their own. So you have 4 couples, 8 characters, and every single one had a different perspective. And then we got the story from them. And that just made it feel really disconnected for me. Because when something important was happening, instead of getting the story from the person that it was happening to or it affected to the most, we would get the perspective from somebody else. And I was like, why are you doing that? Like, that defeats the entire purpose of me knowing how this individual is feeling about everything that's being revealed right now. And I was really looking forward to the story with the fact that we were going to have multiple chapters from all the different characters, but I feel like she really just did too much. On top of that, it was very repetitive. Like, every character that she started talking about, she would give us a backstory as to what happened in their book. And as someone that just read their books less than 6 months ago, we could have did without all that filler. It was like she was trying to reach a word count, so she wanted to reach that word count. And the word count was reached, the book was published. I was really unhappy with the story. I would recommend it because it needs to be read to finish the story. It did give me closure in a sense because everybody had their happily ever afters or whatever or whatnot, right? I want to talk in detail about it, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Every single thing that made me upset is a spoiler. So we're gonna move on to the other 2 books. Runix. What the fuck? I also listened to the audiobook of A Dish Best Served Hot and Sleeping with a Frenemy. A Dish Best Served Hot, I ended up giving this a perfect rating. It is book 2 in the series, and then Sleeping with a Frenemy is book 3 in the series. This follows a Hispanic family, and I love how the found family is portrayed throughout the story and the characters. There's this meddling grandpa that likes to make sure that all his grandchildren find their happily ever after, so he's the main puzzle piece in every single book that you read. And he is my favorite character. Then I listened to the audiobook of Restore Me, and this man is the definition of if he could, he would, because the male lead waited 12 years. Let that sink in. That is a long time to wait for the love of your life. This book does talk about grief and the loss of a child, so please make sure you read your trigger warnings going into the story. But I think the story was beautiful. I loved how it was written, and I can definitely see myself reading more books by this author. After Hours on Milagro Street had me wanting to fight the female lead because she just kept kicking the male lead while he was down, and he was actually a very nice person. She just had daddy issues and she was taking it out on the wrong person. The female lead in the story wanted to buy her grandma's bar to turn it into like a nightclub pretty much with her siblings, and the grandma didn't want to sell it to her because she knew that she didn't have the right intentions behind wanting to buy it. And the male lead also wanted to buy the bar from the grandma, but he actually wanted to make it into like a museum to show how the Hispanic culture within that town has shaped it to be what it is. So he had really good intentions and everybody loved him except for the female lead, and she really had no good reason for not liking him. Like I said, it was just daddy issues. And then when we got to the daddy issues, I was like, girl, bye. That's what you're mad over? I ended up giving that book a 2-star. I definitely want to read the other book in the series because it follows a different sister and they are standalones, but that character just aggravated me so much. I don't think I've ever disliked a character more as a person. If I saw her in person, we could not be friends. We are not built the same. And last but not least, I read Bullets and Mistletoe. So this is a Wide Shoes holiday novella with an romance, and I feel like this book is just a perfect one to have on your end of the year TBR, especially if you're trying to reach your reading goal, because it's short, sweet, and straight to the point. The female lead for this book gets trapped in an inn due to a snowstorm, and she is trapped with 3 males. One of the males is actually someone that was from her childhood, and she thought she was never gonna see him ever again. So they get to talk and rekindle their love after being away from each other for so long. And then his 2 best friends are with him, so you know, things happen and they live happily ever after. I also read Shield and Savior by Meg Fitzpatrick, and I feel like this book was just the perfect blend of a mafia romance with a found family trope in there. The female lead for this book has to return back home after being away for a long time because her life is in danger, and then she is assigned a bodyguard. Of course, the 2 of them can't deny that there's chemistry between them, but she has a son, and the little kid just added this wholesomeness to the story that tied everything together. I loved how all the families really loved one another, even though they all had their own issues, I would say. But at the end of the day, they really came together to make sure that every single person in their family was protected, because what they all do is very dangerous. And I read book 2 in the series, which is Sins and Secrets, and this one was a little bit more complicated because the female lead and the male lead were childhood sweethearts, but then they ended up being separated due to their families, and then they had to put their differences aside to be at the wedding for the male lead's sister, but it was the best friend of the female lead, and no one had known that they had a relationship together so long ago. So then when that came to light, it was no bueno. I feel like I say this every time, so I saved it for the end of the video, but I cannot believe it's already December, which is also my birthday month. I really want to go snowing this year, but we'll see if we get enough snow for that. We didn't get any snow last year. But anyways, those are all the books that I read in the month of November. I hope December can be a little bit better for me. I feel like out of all those books, I didn't really like a lot of them, but we'll see what December has in store. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.